new instructions, active and passive resistance, and a categorical rejection of negotiation. He repeats it 3 times. He says, I will not back down. I will not negotiate. I will not capitulate. In communication theory, repetition is intentional. Repetition sends the message deep, and repetition creates a sense of awareness, both from the sender and from the receiver of that message. Tchiroma's emphatic repeat of these lines and the depth of his voice and the seriousness on his face when he said these lines signals to Cameroonians that it is an uncompromising phase of political confrontation in Cameroon. Confrontation, not because Tchiroma wants confrontation. Confrontation because the ballot box said Tchiroma won the elections. The Beyond Africa podcast. Welcome to the Beyond Africa podcast, the only platform where experts share their views on African issues. You are welcome again to the Beyond Africa podcast with me, your host, Ngalim Bernard. At the Beyond Africa podcast, we share African stories that change lives. I told you a few days ago that Issa Tchiroma Bakari's silence was pregnant. And today he did speak, and Cameroonians finally heard what I said. So from his speech, I picked out a few key themes that I want us to reflect on. But before we go into that reflection proper, let me identify the key themes that I found. The first theme is the rejection of the regime's partial concessions. If you remember in the speech, he said the regime should release all the political prisoners. He continues to assert his electoral legitimacy. He referred to martyrdom and national suffering. He called for a national day of mourning as a political resistance. Then he connects these events of this electoral season throughout history right to independence. And he reasserts moral authority and civic unity within the Cameroonian people. Then he promises structural change, which leads to education and all the rest. Then one major announcement was a strategy that would define active and passive resistance. Whatever that is, we'll definitely communicate that in due time. And then his absolute refusal to negotiate with the regime. I wanted to bring these issues out first so that we have a reflection of them before we start talking about their details and their understanding. Before we go into the details and understandings of these various themes, thank you all for continuously watching, liking, subscribing, and making this podcast grow. At the Beyond Africa podcast, we feel excited. We are extremely happy that we are building a community. We ask for comments every time, and if we don't read your comments or we don't react to your comments, it means we're overtaken by issues. Maybe we had long meetings, maybe we had long days, but we are committed and we do our best to react to the comments whenever we get them. So keep the comments flowing, keep the comments coming. As of now, the community is growing, and thank you so much for that. So let's talk about the speech by President Issa Tchiroma Bakari. Today, Cameroonians finally heard what I told them a few days ago. I said Tchiroma was going to speak, and when he did, the tone, the timing, and the message would be far more than words could tell, and that is what we saw. His demeanor and the forcefulness of his words and the declarations he made were very strong. This speech is not just another political statement. It is a calculated shift from resistance to mourning and then back to resistance. And that transition is at the heart of this analysis. Before I proceed, kindly tell me what you think about President Tchiroma's speech. Did you like it? Did it resonate with you? Did you connect with it? Did you hear what you expected to hear? And is there anything you would have loved him to talk about? Tell us in the comments section. So to discuss his speech, let us begin with the opening because Tchiroma frames the regime's partial release of detainees as a charade. Whether one supports Tchiroma or not, this is a deliberate rhetorical move. He positions himself as the only figure refusing to be distracted by symbolic gestures. In my previous reflection, I said the regime was trying to redefine the problem by creating a human rights problem out of the original problem. The human rights problem, according to the regime, was going to cause Tchiroma and all the other important stakeholders to focus on the releases of those who were illegally detained and forget about the main problem, which is the truth from the ballot box. This has worked in other cases, but alas, in this case, Tchiroma refused to be distracted by the charade. He confirmed detainees had no reason to be in prison anyway, and so there is just no reason to even talk about them being released. He insisted they should be released. And of course, those who were released should definitely have been released, but his close aides are still in prison. So we can now agree that Tchiroma's silence in the past days becomes in this speech a dramatic instrument, a way to say, I was watching, and now I judge, and I give you my interpretation of the issues. The interpretation is nothing was done, so expect what comes next. Next in the speech is the pivotal move to martyrdom. And it is here that he raises the emotional temperature. He names minors, he names mothers, he names young people that were hunted and beaten, and some even killed. This is standard political rhetoric, but in this context, where actual deaths have occurred, it lands differently. Cameroonians feel it differently. Victims and their families feel the direct emotion of sympathy and empathy from a leader who thinks about them, who has them at heart. He even goes further to refer to these people as Cameroon. So he does not talk about them as individuals, but he talks about them as Cameroon. And by so doing, he frames his resistance not as politics, but as national identity. Everybody feels involved. If somebody were injured in Douala, another one killed in Garoua, another one tortured in Kumba, all of them feel involved. Why? Because Tchiroma puts them in one basket, and that basket is called Cameroon. So these individuals are called Cameroon. They are not themselves. He shapes national identity, brings everyone together, and that feeling resonates with one another. And that is how you build a nation of people who feel that relationship between themselves, not by presidential decrees. Now, the most striking section of the speech, the one that will define the next week in the country, that is his call for a national day of mourning on November 1st. And let's be honest, this is not just mourning. This is a political act that is carefully dressed in the cloth of national grief. When a politician tells an entire nation to shut down offices, schools, businesses, and administrative services, he is not only asking for silence, he is calling for mass coordinated civil resistance. And remember, nowhere and at no time has this regime that is forcing itself in power ever called for a national day of mourning because Cameroonians died. Consider the tragic road accidents. 30, 40 Cameroonians can die. No day of national mourning. Consider the killings in the northwest and the southwest regions. No days of national mourning. Consider the killings in the extreme north. No days of national mourning. So, Tchiroma understands the importance of letting Cameroonians feel for themselves, and he calls them together to coordinate themselves within a system that shows to the current regime that Cameroonians are a people who feel sympathy for one another. Tchiroma is not doing this only as a political action, but he is building that sense of national unity where Cameroonians understand that if something happens to somebody in Garoua Bulai or in Kambe, or in Sangmalima, or in Yoko, those are all Cameroonians and they should have the same feeling. This simple gesture will reassert his legitimacy and general acceptance. He is building a mass movement that when Cameroonians would feel connected to one another, it would be easy for Cameroonians to stand up as one person. As of now, forces have been made to spread and break Cameroonians apart. But right now, Tchiroma is building that fabric that will hold Cameroonians together. This is why this part of the speech is so important, because mourning becomes a tool of political pressure. The minute of silence at noon, or the gatherings in places of worship, plus the language of collective dignity, all of this transforms grief into political mobilization, into the building of national identity. Tchiroma simply wants the world to see unity. He wants the regime to see the strength of people when they are bonded together, when they feel that sense of national unity, because it is in moments of grief that we feel the most attached to each other. And he wants the people to feel, even if it is just for 24 hours, that they control the rhythm of the country, that they control where the country is going to, and they have the power to dictate what happens. Remember, in one of my previous reflections, I said where we are today, Tchiroma is just an individual, and others have been echoing this. Tchiroma is just an individual. If he's out of the scene today, the movement must continue. The national identity, the building of a fabric that unites people to say, hey, we are one people and we own the future and the destiny of this country must continue. And that is where we are today. Even with that, Tchiroma does something else. He connects today's struggle with the fathers of independence of the 1950s and the leaders of the 1990s with the murders of 2008. Whether one agrees with these comparisons or not, the strategy is clear. He wants this moment to enter into Cameroon's historical line as one of resistance, as one when the national fabric finally came together, as one when national unity was spoken about, not from papers and speeches, but built by Cameroonians themselves, because they felt that on October 12th, they elected somebody and that victory was not given to them. So Cameroonians would move forward as one person to reclaim what they believe is rightfully theirs. And Tchiroma is building it in a way that keeps him out of the narrative. He is talking to you, he is talking to me, telling us that either we all identify as those from whom the victory was stolen, or we identify as those from whom a family member has been injured, or a family member has been killed. Remember, when he spoke about the release of political detainees, he did not say those arrested only around the 2025 elections. He said all political prisoners, meaning everybody was ever been arrested and detained as a political prisoner. So the movement he is building unites everyone, and there is little doubt to this. When you remember his visit to Bamenda, he built a bond with the population at the Commercial Avenue. That spoke for itself at the time. If we want to take it a little bit further, Tchiroma simply wants November 21 to be remembered and narrated as a day that was symbolically charged, a day that brought national unity to bear upon the eyes of Cameroonians, a day that transfers the pain of the 2-week ghost of the a day that transfers the pain of the ghost towns and the demonstrations that resulted in death and illegal arrests into a symbolic gesture, a symbolic fabric that bound Cameroonians, where Cameroonians came out as people who feel an emotional connection of patriotism, nationhood, and national unity amongst themselves, taking Cameroonians away from national unity that is only being declared in speeches but felt amongst Cameroonians. What comes next is the announcement of a fund for victims, a predictable but necessary component for a movement claiming moral authority. Such a fund calls for all to remember that the struggle is a collective effort. No one is left behind. Everyone counts. The fallen, the injured, the active. No one is forgotten. Families are suffering right now because they have to pay bills for their loved ones. Some are paying mortuary bills, some are paying hospital bills, some need to replace the breadwinner for the family. No one on the other side has ever felt that pain. Even soldiers and police officers and gendarmerie officers who are deployed by the regime to go out there, when they are injured or when they are killed on the battlefront, their families continue suffering by themselves. But here, Tchiroma is bringing a different vision, a vision that should be bought by any person who believes that people who sacrifice for the nation must be compensated in one way or the other. We are not inviting people to go die simply because Tchiroma has launched a fund to support the victims. We are encouraging people to contribute to the fund so that those who stand firm and those who believe that nation matters do not lose their lives in vain, do not lose their limbs without a source of medical treatment, do not fall without a source of family support. That is what Tchiroma means in this particular message. The people stand firm and they stand strong, and Tchiroma brings to them a victim fund. A victim fund that is funded by citizens is stronger than a victim fund that is funded by a few individuals. Little drops can make an ocean. When Tchiroma brings out the detailed plans, listen to that. If you remember carefully, during the COVID epidemic, MRC Maurice Kamto launched the COVID drive, and that drive helped Cameroonians even more than the government did. Also remember, CONAC and other government offices are very clear that some government officials, they mentioned that Tanganji's name, embezzled money from COVID. If you are familiar with the news, you remember what they call the COVID gate. That is a scandal. That is how the other side manages the money. But now Tchiroma is launching an open fund for Cameroonians to contribute their money into. That money goes to victims, and these victims actually need our support. But behind this, the real political message lies in the following lines: new instructions, active and passive resistance, and a categorical rejection of negotiation. He repeats it 3 times. He says, I will not back down. I will not negotiate. I will not capitulate. In communication theory, repetition is intentional. Repetition sends the message deep, and repetition creates a sense of awareness, both from the sender and from the receiver of that message. Tchiroma's emphatic repeat of these lines and the depth of his voice and the seriousness on his face when he said these lines signals to Cameroonians that it is an uncompromising phase of political confrontation in Cameroon. Confrontation, not because Tchiroma wants confrontation. Confrontation because the ballot box said Tchiroma won the elections, but it was declared that a different person won the elections. That is the source of the confrontation. Confrontation because Tchiroma said, please live honorably. Let the results of the ballot box be respected, but they have not left. Confrontation because Tchiroma said, Cameroonians, get down to the streets and celebrate our victory, and ask the Constitutional Council to respect and read only results that came out of the ballot box. Rather, they sent out soldiers to go kill Cameroonians. Confrontation because Tchiroma said, since they are killing us, now you stay home for 3 days of ghost town. They were forcing Cameroonians to go out to the stores. That is why there is confrontation. Confrontation is not because Tchiroma is calling for it. Confrontation is because Cameroonians can bear witness, can bear testimony, can bear the truth that Tchiroma has asked the regime to give the power where the power belongs. But the regime is doing everything to stay in power at all costs. That is where the confrontation is coming from. That is not fair. That is not just. We Cameroonians, we know what is fair. We know what is just. The results from the ballot box have spoken. They should be respected. That is why elections are organized. And that brings us to the end of the speech, in which he launches a direct attack on the regime's legitimacy. He frames their oath that they took on the Bible as perjury. He implies moral decay, moral rot, moral decadence, and he declares their fall inevitable. Whether this is true or not is another debate, but rhetorically, he is raising the emotional stakes for Cameroonians while leaving the door to political compromise open. And that compromise means leave the presidency because you lost the elections. Let Cameroonians be ruled and administered by the person who won the elections because Cameroonians gave their trust and their confidence to that person. So, what does this mean? It means Tchiroma is entering a new phase, symbolic resistance through national grief, followed by organized resistance in action. Mourning is the emotional trigger that binds Cameroonians, living and dead, together. Resistance is the political objective that will take Cameroonians to secure the victory. And for those who have been following this platform, you know I told you he would speak. And when he did speak, it would not be a soft message. It would be a turning point. And that is exactly what we see here. If Cameroon responds massively to the call for mourning, it will reshape the political landscape. If the day passes quietly, the speech risks fading out as rhetoric and as irrelevant. And the regime will try to do everything to ensure that the speech and the call for national mourning fades out as rhetoric and irrelevant. It is incumbent on you, on me, to ensure that Cameroonians mourn on the 21st, to ensure that Cameroonians do not let the blood and the soul of Cameroonians go away for free. The significance of November 21 will depend on how Cameroonians choose to embody or reject the call. When people look at Burkina Faso in 2014 or Nepal in 2025, some say that is what Cameroon should do. The people came out massively in a peaceful revolution and took out the oppressive governments. It took people demonstrating en masse to change the course of those regimes. This is a moment of national redefinition. It needs Cameroonians en masse. Whether one supports Tchiroma or not, what Tchiroma has done is clear. He has moved the struggle from the streets into the symbolic heart of the nation, our memories, our mourning, and our moral authority. And he is betting everything on that. He is betting everything on you, on me. We need to continue working towards redefining a nation where citizens' voices are respected, a nation where citizens control the government, not the government controlling citizens. I have been Galim Bernard, your host on the Beyond Africa podcast. What a time to be alive. What a time to follow Cameroonian politics. Thank you as usual for always watching, supporting, leaving your comments. That is the best way to support us. See you in the next episode.
Oh,
43 years the river has flowed. Same bank, same stone, same winding road. But the youth are calling with voices loud, breaking through the grey morning cloud. The land is tired, the people are strong, waiting, praying it won't be long. One man stepped from the halls of power to stand with us in this urgent hour. Tchiroma, oh Tchiroma, you carry our dream, a beacon shining where hope has been. From the mountains to the shore, we raise our prayer that change will come and justice be fair.
Tchiroma, oh Tchiroma, light the way home for every child of Cameroon.
In every village, every crowded street, hearts are pounding with history's beat. The hands that built this nation cry for schools that teach for truth, not lies, for bread on tables, for work and pride, for leaders who will walk beside, not above us, not beyond our reach, but one who practices what they preach. Tchiroma, oh Tchiroma, you carry our dream, a beacon shining where hope has been. From the mountains to the shore, we raise our prayer that change will come and justice be fair.
Tchiroma, oh Tchiroma, light the way home for every child of Cameroon.
Who has served so long, your chapter's written, your story strong. Find your ease now in honor and grace, pass the torch to a younger face. Let Cameroon remember you, not for holding on but letting through the dawn that's breaking, the hope reborn. This is not defeat, it's a gentler moon. Tchiroma, oh Tchiroma, you carry our dream, a beacon shining where hope has been. From the mountains to the shore, the people stand ready to rebuild this blessed land.
Tchiroma, oh Tchiroma, we believe it'll come home.
Tchiroma, oh Tchiroma, you carry our dream,
Tchiroma,
a beacon shining and where hope has been. From the mountains to the shore, the people stand ready to rebuild this blessed land.
Tchiroma, oh Tchiroma, light the way home for every child of Cameroon.
Cameroonians should resist the temptation to equate silence with fear or failure. One thing we know about Tchiroma, whether one sees him as a controversial figure, an opportunist, or an unpredictable political survivor, the fact is he rarely throws away a dramatic gesture. His political career has been built on visibility, messaging, and the art of returning to the stage when it matters most. If he intended to walk away quietly, he would never have given the 48-hour ultimatum. He could have negotiated behind the scenes quietly, issued gentle suggestions, or stayed away from the conversation altogether. He has done this before. He joined the government. But this time, he chose confrontation. That tells us something else. The silence is likely strategic. It is not spontaneous. Dear viewers, you're welcome to the Beyond Africa podcast with me, your host, Ngalim Bernard. At the Beyond Africa podcast, we tell stories that change lives. Today, we are back in Cameroon, where we discuss the Cameroonian political atmosphere. Tchiroma is the man of the day. His strategies, his statements, and his silence are more important today than they have ever been in the past. But Cameroonians are questioning why he is so silent. So today, in the next 7 points, I detail what I see as Tchiroma's strategy or what circumstances are forcing Tchiroma to adopt as strategy. In politics, circumstances and intentional calculation determine the path to political action. That is what we are going to discuss here today. As usual, thank you all for watching. Thank you all for subscribing, commenting, liking, and sharing. That is the best way you give us the impetus, the energy to continue going. We are a few subscribers short of 15,000 subscribers. Thank you so much for all the energy you are giving us and all the private and public messages you are sharing with us about the value that we bring to you. That is the objective we seek to bring to you. We seek to bring value so that we understand what is happening in Africa's political landscape. This is not only about Cameroon, it's about Africa. And definitely, I promise you, I'm bringing in a high-profile African over the next few days to talk about the situation in Cameroon with a lens from an international perspective. This African has observed elections in different African countries, has participated in elections in different African countries, and has developed a continental voice that determines and shapes public policy across Africa. So stay tuned and hit the subscription button so when the interview with him drops, you'll be the first to know. After Tchiroma's 48-hour ultimatum, the silence in Cameroon is pregnant. The atmosphere is questionable. Since Tchiroma gave the government 48 hours to release all political prisoners, there is a particular kind of silence in the Cameroonian political landscape that has become louder than noise, louder than speeches, and louder than statements and even action. After Tchiroma's deadline came and went, anti-Tchiroma voices are probably jubilating and claiming that Tchiroma is a helpless man without the capacity to force government into any form of action. However, on the other side, Tchiroma's supporters and the common man are understandably asking the following questions. What next? Has Tchiroma backed down? Has something strange happened? Should people expect a follow-up? Or was Tchiroma just doing a one-man show as a form of political drama? These are the right questions, and they reflect a country that has learned through decades, 43 years of experience, that nothing in Cameroon's political arena happens in a straight line. But before anxiety turns into speculation, it is important to have a deep breath, observe, and analyze the moment with clarity. Let's get back to the substance of our conversation. Silence does not always mean retreat. In fact, in politics, silence often signals negotiations, recalibration, and an assessment of the consequences of previous action and the potential consequences of future action. This commentary is reading the political atmosphere as it stands today and to outline why Cameroonians should remain calm, not because all is well, but because political actors rarely abandon moves that have already captured public attention. When someone like Tchiroma speaks with the force with which he spoke, the determination and the depth in his breath, then falls silent, the story is generally not over. The story is simply starting. As I told you, we are going to read the political landscape in Cameroon over 7 points. Please kindly go to the comments section and tell us what you think about Tchiroma's silence. And at the end of the podcast, tell us which of the 7 points you feel most aligned with and which of them you think is important for Tchiroma to work on as he prepares to liberate Cameroonians. And the first of those points is situating the moment. Let us situate the moment of Tchiroma's ultimatum to the government of Cameroon, then his subsequent silence. Tchiroma did something highly unusual. He issued an ultimatum to the very system that he had defended for more than 10 years. For a politician known largely for loyalty, this marked a clear departure from his loyalty, from where he had been for at least 10 years. Many supporters were surprised. Many opponents were skeptical. But everyone understood that a line had been crossed. Ultimatums in Cameroonian politics are not issued frivolously, especially not on matters as sensitive as political prisoners. When someone with Tchiroma's profile takes that public risk, it is rarely an act of impulsion or emotion. It usually reflects a strategic decision shaped by internal pressures, political calculations, and or changing alliances. Public ultimatums are hardly ever meant to expire. They are openings, not conclusions. They simply set a pace. The expiration of an ultimatum at a particular clock hour does not mean that the action that is going to follow must start immediately at that clock hour. The action that follows could start a week, a month, or a few months after. But for it to have weight, it starts within a calculated, reasonable time period. However, Cameroonians should understand that Tchiroma must have not made this statement as a consequence of emotions, but as a consequence of tactical calculations. The second point is Cameroonians should resist the temptation to equate silence with fear or equate silence with failure. One thing we know about Tchiroma, whether one sees him as a controversial figure, an opportunist, or an unpredictable political survivor, the fact is he rarely throws away a dramatic gesture. His political career has been built on visibility, messaging, and the art of returning to the stage when it matters most. If he intended to walk away quietly, he would never have set a public countdown in motion. He would never have given the 48-hour ultimatum. He could have negotiated behind the scenes quietly, issued gentle suggestions, or stayed away from the conversation altogether. He has done this before. He joined the government. But this time, he chose confrontation, publicity, and timing. That tells us something else. The silence is likely strategic. It is not spontaneous. He has been there, he has seen it, and he knows how to confront it. Remember, he even issued a playbook telling the government that he knows their play style. He told them the first step they do is prevent people from running at elections. The next step is rigging the elections. The next step is arresting people, detaining people, and spreading around false information. So Tchiroma does not come across as someone who is ignorant of the current system that he is fighting against. Our third point is noting the political climate today is not what it has been for 10 years or even 5 years ago. 7 years ago, we were all talking about Kamto. 10 years ago, we were all talking about the war in the northwest and the southwest southern Cameroons. However, public patience is running thin. People are getting tired. Cameroonians do not trust the public and government institutions. Cameroonians over the last few years have shown that the government is not a trustworthy institution. That is why most of them boycotted the elections. The few that registered, voted, and did everything possible to capture the data that shows who won at their polling stations. The government kicked that out. The Constitutional Council did not make things better. All the cases before the Constitutional Council were either dismissed or considered irrelevant or inadmissible, as lawyers would call them. But that does only one thing. It instills fear in Cameroonians, not because Cameroonians like to be afraid, but because the government uses the military, and mostly military in non-military attire, to arrest Cameroonians. More than 2,000 Cameroonians have been arrested and some have been tortured following this past election. Therefore, fear still exists, of course, but the government's monopoly on the narrative is weakening. The government has used the state media, CRTV, for so many years that they believe that CRTV is the only organ that can communicate with Cameroonians. Even independent and private media, like Equinox TV, that were the last men standing, have been bullied into compliance with the government's position. That is why independent media, like the Beyond Africa podcast and others, are standing up for freedom of speech, freedom of expression, and freedom of opinion. We cannot be bullied. Why? Because we do not depend on the government, and the government does not have any control over us. We have direct communication with anyone who wants to understand African stories from an African perspective. We do not have an editorial policy that shapes what we say. We do not have a producer that sings into our ears what we should say. We say it and we give you the opportunity to come for a conversation. We are inviting everyone to come to the Beyond Africa podcast for an interview. You share your views. We simply ask probing questions so that we get to know you better, get to know your ideas better, and of course, the viewers will get your position better. Once you make your opinion here, it is clear it is your opinion, it is not ours. The civic space, the media space in Cameroon is narrowing and is weakening. The government knows this, the opposition knows this, and the international community knows this. Certainly, Tchiroma knows this. And when the political environment becomes this fragile, every actor operates with heightened caution. Tchiroma's next move will not be driven by emotion. It will be calculated to maximize pressure while minimizing self-destruction. Those who expect him to run back into the public sphere with panic misunderstand his political instinct. He will return, but he will return in a manner crafted to reshape the conversation, not to repeat the same statement. When he came out a week ago to give a statement about the ultimatum to the government, most people did not expect that he was going to come from that direction. He came from that direction, gave the ultimatum, because that is what his calculations must have told him. If he were going to go the emotional route, he might have said a different thing. So, give time to time and let time produce its own fruits. The fourth point of our conversation is the public should understand that ultimatums in authoritarian and dictatorial systems rarely produce immediate concessions. The political prisoners that Tchiroma spoke about are at the heart of the regime's insecurity. They represent political dissent, electoral pressure, and evidence of the system's struggle to control a narrative that is slipping through their fingers. You know, the government has always been the loudest. Even when Tchiroma was in government, he always shaped the narrative, and the government's narrative always won the day. But in 2025, with the advent of independent media, the government is unable to shape the narrative, and Tchiroma, being a strategic, eloquent, and coherent communicator, is able to take the lead in the communication. So when Tchiroma demanded the release of political prisoners within 2 days, everyone understood it was unlikely to happen instantly. The value of the ultimatum was not in the expectation of overnight compliance, but in creating a public confrontation that the regime cannot easily ignore. That confrontation continues. Nothing about the underlying tension has changed simply because the clock struck 48 hours and nothing was done. We all saw the government release some political prisoners in Gaoundéré, Douala, Chang, Bafang, etc. And that is not a sign of compliance according to the government, but a reaction in fear of Tchiroma's next steps. The government could now say, oh, but we released some after Tchiroma asked for their release. That is not what Tchiroma said. Tchiroma said all political prisoners. The bulk of the arrestees, whether arrested in 1990 or in 2025, remain in prison. The fifth point of our reflection is that silence creates one important opportunity. One important opportunity. It gives the public time to watch how the regime responds, not to Tchiroma's words directly, but to the environment that they triggered. Remember, we just said Tchiroma's ultimatum was not really meant for the detainees to be released within 48 hours, but to create a political condition, a political environment where there is political tension that would generate certain conditions. So the question here is, will detainee conditions change? Will the legal processes accelerate? Will other political elites speak? Will other opposition candidates join Tchiroma? Will the security forces tighten or loosen their pressure? Will civil society organizations engage and fully take part in the next steps? Will citizens continue to show an interest in defending their votes? Will the diaspora fully participate in education, funding, and awareness raising? Will military personnel continue defecting and joining to support Tchiroma? These indicators and others will shape the next phase. I was telling a friend today that Tchiroma himself at this material moment is surprised at what is happening to him and he needs to change strategies. 1 month ago, Tchiroma did not know that he was going to have such amazing and overwhelming support from Cameroonians. But he has it. How does he re-strategize to fit the moment? As he is building up his base, he is having other people come to join him. Be they politicians, be they financiers, be they funders, they all come together and propose different things to Tchiroma. And you remember the old saying, he who pays the piper determines the tune. So anybody who is bringing any contribution of value to Tchiroma wants to shape Chiroma's strategy. Sometimes all these strategies do not blend. They do not work together. One could be prioritized over another. One might need to come before another, but the stakeholders who are bringing in these strategies might not consider this. So Tchiroma and his teams need time to flesh this out. And I believe that there are working groups and think tanks around Tchiroma that are shaping things out in order to ensure that his next outing fits the moment, fits the purpose, and leads to the final objective. Because we need to remember that political moves like these are often followed by a coordinated phase of back-channel negotiation. It is entirely possible that conversations are happening quietly, conversations that cannot be made public. In politics, what is visible is never the full story. The full story happens behind the scenes. Nobody sees what happens. A few people come out and give a representation of what might have been discussed behind the scenes. So the stakeholders and all those who are doing the negotiations have a critical role to play. Their voices need to be heard, and Tchiroma is in a position where he must make certain decisions at a time when he was not prepared or might not be ready to make those decisions. But the overwhelming support and cries of Cameroonians that he is listening to, that he is hearing them say, is influencing him as he makes those choices. He's been very clear that Cameroon is going to have new leadership, come what may, because Cameroonians voted for that new leadership in the ballot box. Our sixth point is that there is a psychological aspect that Cameroonians should recognize. For years, at least for 43 years, the system operated on predictability. That is, the same voices, the same narratives, the same defenses. But Tchiroma's ultimatum disrupted this predictability. Is there anyone who is surprised that the CPDM rigged the elections? Or is there anyone who is surprised that the Constitutional Council declared Paul Biya the winner? Is there anyone who is surprised that as soon as citizens start demonstrating peacefully on the streets, they are met with live bullets? Is there anyone who is surprised that when Tchiroma called for the ghost towns, they decided to move around forcing people to open their shops? No one is surprised. For 43 years, this system has built a mechanism that can be read, and it is all built on force. So breaking down a 43-year system takes time, takes strategy, takes resources, takes energy, takes people to work on that. And since the regime now has to calculate how to deal with someone who knows their internal language, its communication machinery, and its vulnerabilities, Tchiroma on his own part needs to outwork them and outsmart them. He needs to be ahead of them. That is why we say Chiroma's silence may just be pregnant. It may not only be silence. It is silence that when it gives birth, re-energizes and gives new momentum to Cameroonians. That alone ensures that the matter is far from resolved. Simply because when a long-time ally breaks ranks, the regime cannot simply ignore him. Silence is common, but silence is not dismissal. The regime cannot ignore Tchiroma. They know what Tchiroma can do. Tchiroma defended them, played their PR role, and gave them good reputation over the years. So they know that what comes out of Tchiroma's mouth is likely going to be met either with appreciation or rejection. But they also know that anyone Tchiroma is talking to understands that Tchiroma understands the inner workings of the regime, and whatever he says is given credibility. So meanwhile, the public should resist being drawn into panic. Moments like this often tempt actors, both political and civilian, to rush to conclusions, assume the worst, or declare that everything is lost. Should Cameroonians really be trying to declare that everything is lost, or the panic that we see, that we hear on social media about Tchiroma Should that really be what Cameroonians are looking for or what Cameroonians are giving out there? However, Cameroon is entering a new political phase in which major actors are repositioning themselves for the future. Moves that may appear chaotic or confusing are often part of long-term strategies whose results are not immediately visible. Whatever is happening at this material moment may not tell us what Tchiroma is doing, but its outcome may be in the long term, and the strategies to take us there need a lot of tactical reasoning and tactical maneuvering. And the final point for our reflection is Tchiroma will definitely return because political relevance requires continuity. If Tchiroma disappears from the political environment for the next 1 month, he loses everything. He loses his political capital. Nobody will think about him in the next few weeks, and Cameroonians will definitely consider him a loser. Because no politician issues an ultimatum that dominates the national conversation and then disappears permanently. Tchiroma will definitely be back. He gave the orders. He encouraged Cameroonians to go demonstrate. They went. He asked Cameroonians to observe ghost towns. They did. Is it at this moment that Tchiroma is going to disappear? He knows that he benefits from the legitimacy of Cameroonians, their support, and their good prayers. So he knows that at this material moment, he is going nowhere. Momentum in politics is the currency. Visibility is the capital. So if he is not visible, he is not going to have the currency to buy Cameroonians with, or to apply to Cameroonians, to relate with Cameroonians. And Tchiroma, whatever one thinks of him, understands that political capital is better than most or anything that he can gain at this material moment. If you promise him the vice presidency or the prime ministerial office, Tchiroma knows that what he's going to have in communion with Cameroonians over the next few weeks is worth much more than anything that could be promised to him. That is the salvation of Cameroon, breaking down a dictatorial regime that has survived on repression and force and brutality to maintain itself in power, not legitimacy, not the vote of the people. Tchiroma's silence, in my view, is temporary because his political survival depends on completing the long journey that has just begun. You remember the Chinese proverb, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a step. Tchiroma said he still had some steps, and we were just at step 3. So what is step 4? What is step 5? And what is step 6? One thing is for sure, Tchiroma's return will not be the same as his initial statement. It may come in the form of an interview, a written communique, a broader critique of the political climate, rather than a direct confrontation. It may come as a public speech, as an appeal, rather than a threat. But he will return because the story he opened is not one he can afford to leave unfinished. Cameroonians are waiting on Tchiroma, and Tchiroma should listen and listen clearly. Cameroonians have sacrificed their blood, their time, their money, their energy, their resources, and you have given them hope. Cameroonians are waiting for you, and they know that you are coming to continue from where you ended. For most Cameroonians and supporters are anxious. They are patient, but they are not passive. Do not let their patience erode. It is just an observation. It is just an analysis. It is preparation for whatever comes next. This country is at a delicate moment, but not an unpredictable one. Political actors are repositioning. Old alliances are weakening. New coalitions are forming. And Tchiroma's ultimatum is one of the clearest signals that the post-electoral environment is far from settled. Cameroonians are looking up to Tchiroma, and Tchiroma has an obligation to satisfy Cameroonians. To the public, remain calm, not because calmness means acceptance, but because clarity requires patience. The next moves from Tchiroma, in my view, would be decisive, and they would not come from a place of silence, but from a place of strategy, from a place where the silence he has observed since his ultimatum have shaped the strategy. Tchiroma started something. He would definitely return to finish it. For now, the task is simple. Watch carefully, stay level-headed, and understand that we are in a new phase of Cameroonian politics, one in which even the old players are no longer playing by the old rules. Under Cameroonian politics, the system demands that those who have been playing since 1990 till today would be passive and accept the results and say, okay, let's try again in 2032. But Tchiroma seems to have taken a different orientation, an orientation that does not tie with those who have given up. Almost all other politicians have given up. Tchiroma is the last man standing. And I was super impressed today when I saw a speech by Iyodi telling Paul Biya that Cameroonians did not elect Paul Biya. And he went ahead to give a path to resolving Cameroon's problems. That is the type of that is a class of politicians that Cameroonians need, those who speak out at moments like this. Even if Iyori did not say what you wanted to hear, he actually positioned the conversation where the people wanted. The declaration by the Constitutional Council was illegitimate, meaning it is illegal. Iyodi is right, and Cameroonians need to continue towards that direction. For the Beyond Africa podcast, I have been your host, Ngalim Bernard. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for liking, subscribing, and sharing. See you in the next episode of the Beyond Africa podcast. Please tell us which of the 7 points you feel most aligned with and which of them you think is important for Tchiroma to work on as he prepares to liberate Cameroonians.